Before we begin, let me warn you, this story is not what you think. If you don't watch until the end, you'll never understand the full picture. What looks like glamour, fame, and rock and roll hides scars, secrets, and shocking twists that shaped one of the biggest names in music history. In 1983, Gene Simmons met Shannon Tweed at the Playboy Mansion. It would take him 28 years to marry her, but the truth behind their 2011 wedding wasn't romance. It was about covering up a scandal that nearly destroyed his family. Recently uncovered footage from their reality show revealed private conversations that were never meant to be seen. His own son faced a plagiarism scandal, and legal documents from 2025 mentioned troubling incidents involving female employees. The man who once boasted about sleeping with 4,800 women was finally facing consequences far beyond the wild image he had built. But Gene Simmons wasn't always Gene Simmons. He was born Chaim Witz on August 25, 1949, in Haifa, Israel. His mother, Flora Klein, was a Holocaust survivor who had escaped Nazi concentration camps, while his father, Yehiel, also fled Hungary. They carried the weight of unimaginable pain. By the age of 6, Chaim's parents divorced, leaving his mother to raise him in poverty. She worked long hours in factories, while he picked fruit and sold it by the roadside to survive. Life was cruel. Bullied in school, often left alone at night, he cried himself to sleep. Yet, amidst this hardship, something else sparked, a fascination with American comic books. Superman, Spider-Man, larger-than-life heroes became his escape. By 7, he was teaching himself English just to understand their stories. This painful childhood built the foundation of someone who swore never to be weak again. Remember, you need to stay with me until the very end, because this story twists in ways you won't expect. What started with a boy struggling to survive in New York would soon turn into one of the loudest, most theatrical rock acts in history. By 1970, Gene Simmons was still chasing his dream. He studied education, even worked briefly as a 6th-grade teacher, but the classroom wasn't his destiny. Together with Paul Stanley, he formed a band called Wicked Lester. They recorded an album, but the label hated it. Furious, Gene and Paul shut the project down, determined to start fresh. That failure sparked the birth of something bigger, Kiss. In January 1973, Gene and Paul found Peter Criss through a newspaper ad and Ace Frehley through another. The four of them created a band that wasn't just about music, it was about spectacle. Fire, makeup, blood, and characters larger than life. Gene became the Demon, inspired by horror movies and comic books. Their first shows drew barely a handful of people, but what those people saw, they never forgot. Bill O'Coin spotted their raw energy and got them a record deal with Casablanca Records. At first, their albums struggled, but their relentless touring, hundreds of shows, night after night, began to change everything. Then, in 1975, the live album Alive exploded. Suddenly, Kiss wasn't just a gimmick. They were legends in the making. Gene's persona grew bolder. On stage, he breathed fire and spit blood. Off stage, his wild lifestyle made headlines. But every risk, every outrageous stunt, pulled more people in. By 1976, with albums like Destroyer, Kiss was not just a band, it was a phenomenon. But behind the fame, cracks were already forming. And those cracks would turn into fractures that nearly destroyed everything. Stay with me, because this is the point where things turned shocking. Fame was climbing, money was pouring in, but beneath the makeup, the cracks inside Kiss were spreading. By the late 1970s, the band's live shows were unlike anything rock had seen. Gene flying across the stage, guitars shooting sparks, fire blasting into the air. Crowds filled stadiums, and yet behind the scenes, tensions burned. Peter Criss was struggling, missing beats, even stopping mid-show. Gene later called it self-destruction, and by 1980, Peter was out of the band. Then came a moment nobody thought possible. On September 18, 1983, Kiss took off the makeup live on MTV. For 10 years, fans had no idea what they looked like. The gamble worked. Their album Lick It Up went platinum and brought them roaring back. For Gene, this wasn't just reinvention, it was survival. But his personal life was just as chaotic. Between music and Hollywood roles, Gene's reputation for chasing attention and women became legendary. One of the biggest scandals erupted when he was dating Cher. only to begin a relationship with her close friend Diana Ross. The fallout made headlines everywhere, painting Gene as unpredictable both on and off stage. By the 1990s, after years of turmoil, the impossible happened. The original members reunited, the makeup returned, and suddenly the band was selling out arenas again. The reunion tour made over $140 million, proving that no matter the chaos, fans still wanted more. Yet money created new battles, flat pay rates for some members, bigger cuts for Gene and Paul, and lawsuits that reopened old wounds. Still, Gene kept building his empire. He wasn't just the face of a band. He was turning himself into a global brand. You think you've seen it all, but the story only grows stranger. By the 2000s, Gene Simmons was no longer just a rock star. He had turned himself into a businessman, an actor, and the face of a billion-dollar brand. But with every success came scandals that threatened to unravel it all. His reality show, Gene Simmons' Family Jewels, gave fans a rare look behind the mask. Running for 7 seasons, it showed his life with Shannon Tweed and their children, Nick and Sophie. On screen, he was a father and partner, but the show also revealed conflicts, arguments, therapy sessions, and Shannon's frustration with his refusal to commit. After 28 years together, Gene finally married her in 2011, a wedding that shocked both fans and critics who thought it would never happen. Yet, reality TV couldn't hide the chaos. In 2008, an alleged tape surfaced that forced him into legal battles. Around the same time, old controversies resurfaced. His habit of photographing encounters, his endless boasting about partners, and lawsuits from women who accused him of inappropriate behavior. Gene always denied wrongdoing, but the headlines followed him. Still, his empire expanded. The KISS logo appeared on over 5,000 products, everything from toys to pinball machines, even branded coffins. The band sold more than 100 million albums, and Gene's personal fortune climbed past $400 million. But money couldn't shield him from criticism. In 2017, he tried to trademark the famous devil horns hand gesture, claiming he invented it. The backlash was immediate, and he quickly dropped the attempt. Every time it seemed like his reputation was collapsing, he found a way to rise again. But as the years went on, the gap between Gene Simmons the legend and Gene Simmons the man only grew wider. Don't skip ahead, because the final chapter of this story proves that even legends can't escape consequences. Gene Simmons had built himself into a rock icon, a businessman, and a television personality. But as the years moved forward, the headlines surrounding him became harder to control. His son Nick faced backlash when his comic book was accused of copying Japanese manga. Critics were harsh, and the project was pulled. For a family that had built its life on fame, this was a public embarrassment. Gene defended his son, but the incident showed how quickly admiration could turn to criticism. In 2018, tragedy struck closer to home. Gene's mother, Flora Klein, passed away at the age of 93. A Holocaust survivor, she had been the quiet force who shaped his resilience and determination. Her death left him shaken, and for a moment, fans saw him stripped of the demon image, mourning the woman he always called his moral compass. But controversies didn't stay away for long. In 2024, a careless comment on live television sparked outrage online, with fans calling him out for being inappropriate. Instead of apologizing, Gene doubled down, showing the same defiance that had fueled his career since the 1970s. In 2025, he launched an expensive fan package, charging over $12,000 for backstage access. Critics labeled it greedy, yet it sold out. Even in backlash, Gene found profit. Then came recognition from the highest stage, the Kennedy Center Honors, announced by President Trump. Just years earlier, Gene had publicly criticized him, but now the band accepted the honor. Silence from Gene said more than words, and fans debated whether it was triumph or hypocrisy. After 5 decades, Gene Simmons stood as proof that success and scandal can live side by side, and that every mask eventually slips.